Command told Corporal Leah Winters that treating enemy wounded was a waste of medical supplies that British soldiers might need later. The field manual was clear about priority of care, and insurgents who had just been shooting at her unit were at the bottom of that list. But in a field hospital outside Basra, when a 19-year-old Iraqi fighter came in bleeding out from shrapnel wounds, Leah would make a choice that turned her into the most controversial medic in her battalion and proved that healing was not about choosing sides. It was about refusing to let hatred make you less human. Leah Winters was 28 when she deployed to Iraq as a combat medical technician with the Royal Army Medical Corps. She had steady hands, red hair that she kept in a tight bun, and a voice that stayed calm even when everything around her was falling apart. She could start an IV line in a moving vehicle, pack a wound under fire, and triage 20 casualties in the time it took most medics to assess 5. She grew up in a small village outside Manchester, where her mother worked as a district nurse and her father taught history at the local comprehensive school. Their home was the kind of place where injured animals always ended up, where Leah spent her childhood nursing baby birds and hedgehogs back to health. Her mother used to say that some people were born with the instinct to fix things, and Leah had it stronger than most. She joined the army at 22, not because of family tradition, but because she wanted to help in places where help mattered most. She completed her combat medical training at the Defense Medical Services Training Center and deployed twice to Afghanistan before Iraq. She had seen enough trauma to fill several lifetimes, but it had not hardened her the way it hardened some medics. She still treated every casualty like they were the only person in the world who mattered. If you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, please subscribe. We honor the quiet courage of veterans whose humanity defined their service. Leah's mother, Margaret, had been a nurse for 30 years. She worked in the poorest parts of Manchester, treating people that other medical professionals often judged or dismissed. Addicts, homeless people, criminals. Margaret treated them all with the same care she gave everyone else. Leah asked her once why she bothered with people who would just go back to their old lives. Her mother looked at her seriously and said that healing was not about judging who deserved care. It was about recognizing that every person in pain was still a person, regardless of the choices they had made. That lesson stayed with Leah. During her deployments, she treated everyone the same. British soldiers, Afghan National Army troops, local civilians caught in crossfire. She did not think about politics or sides. She thought about stopping bleeding, maintaining airways, preventing shock. Her first real test came in Afghanistan when an insurgent fighter was brought in with multiple gunshot wounds. He had been firing at British troops hours earlier. Some of the medics wanted to treat him last, after everyone else was stable. Leah treated him immediately because his injuries were the most life-threatening. He survived. Some soldiers in her unit stopped speaking to her after that. Leah understood their anger. These were men who had shot at their friends. But she could not let that anger change how she practiced medicine. The moment she started choosing who deserved treatment based on which uniform they wore, she stopped being a medic and became something else. The field hospital outside Basra was a canvas structure that smelled like antiseptic and diesel fuel. Leah worked 12-hour shifts, treating everything from combat injuries to heat exhaustion to infections. The work was relentless, but it had a rhythm she understood. The controversy started after a firefight near the city. British forces had engaged an insurgent cell operating out of a residential area. The fighting was intense, and casualties came in from both sides. 3 British soldiers with serious wounds, 2 Iraqi civilians, and 1 insurgent fighter, 19 years old with shrapnel wounds to his abdomen and legs. The British soldiers were priority. Leah and her team worked on them first, stabilizing the most critical injuries. 1 soldier had a severed artery. Another had a collapsed lung. The third had burns from an improvised explosive device. All 3 would survive, but it took 2 hours of intense work. The insurgent fighter was conscious, bleeding, in severe pain. The triage assessment said his injuries were serious, but not immediately life-threatening. He could wait. Another medic, Sergeant Paul Drake, suggested they focus on the civilians first and deal with the insurgent last. Maybe he would stabilize on his own. Maybe he would not. Leah looked at the 19-year-old fighter. He was terrified, crying, calling for his mother. She told Drake to help her with the insurgent. Drake refused. He said supplies were limited and British soldiers might need them tomorrow. He said this fighter had probably killed someone's friend, someone's brother. Leah did not argue. She just started working on the insurgent herself. She stopped the bleeding, started fluids, administered pain relief. The young man grabbed her hand and said something in Arabic she did not understand. She told him quietly that she was going to help him, that he would be okay. Drake reported her to their commanding officer, Major Richard Talbot. Leah was called in for a meeting that same evening. Major Talbot was a career officer who ran the medical unit with strict adherence to protocol. He asked Leah to explain her decision to prioritize treating an enemy, combatant over conserving resources and following the chain of medical priority. Leah sat across from him in the small office and tried to find the right words. She said that the insurgent's wounds were serious and that delaying treatment would have resulted in death. She said that as a medic, she was obligated to treat the patient in front of her regardless of circumstances. Talbot listened, then reminded her that battlefield medicine was different from civilian medicine. Resources were finite. Choices had consequences. Treating an enemy fighter today might mean not having supplies to treat a British soldier tomorrow. Leah understood his point. She had made those calculations herself during mass casualty events. But this was not about resources. This was about something else. It was about a system that wanted her to see some casualties as worth less than others. That night, Leah lay in her bunk and thought about her mother. She thought about the addicts and criminals Margaret had treated with dignity. She thought about what her mother would say if she knew Leah had let someone die because they were on the wrong side. She could not do it. She would not do it. Even if it cost her career, the incident created a divide in the medical unit. Some medics supported Leah. They argued that medical ethics did not change based on politics or military affiliation. Others sided with Drake. They said Leah was being naive, that this was war and choices had to be made. The insurgent fighter survived. He was transferred to a detention facility once he was stable. Leah never learned his name or what happened to him after that, but word spread beyond the medical unit. Soldiers in combat units heard that a medic had prioritized treating an insurgent. Some understood. Many did not. Leah started receiving hostile looks in the mess hall. Someone spray-painted something crude on her locker. The tension escalated when another mass casualty event occurred 2 weeks later. A roadside bomb hit a patrol. Multiple British casualties came in simultaneously, along with several Iraqi civilians who had been nearby. Leah worked alongside Drake and the other medics, triaging and treating as fast as possible. One of the British soldiers, a corporal named James Finch, had severe injuries. Leah spent 40 minutes trying to stabilize him, but he died on the table. After the shift, Drake confronted her. He said that maybe if she had not wasted supplies on the insurgent 2 weeks ago, they would have had what they needed to save Finch. It was not true, the supplies were unrelated, but the accusation landed anyway. Leah went outside and sat behind the medical tent. She was exhausted, covered in blood, and for the first time since deploying, she questioned whether she was doing the right thing. 3 days later, another casualty came in, a British soldier. Private Daniel Ross with multiple gunshot wounds. He was critical, minutes from death. Leah and her team worked desperately to stabilize him. They needed blood, but they were low on his type. Then something unexpected happened. One of the Iraqi interpreters who worked with the British forces overheard the blood type needed. He told Leah that there was a detainee at the facility, recently treated, who had the same blood type and had offered to donate if it would help. It was the 19-year-old insurgent fighter, the one Leah had saved. Drake was in the room. He stared at Leah, waiting to see what she would say. Protocol did not cover this situation. Accepting blood from an enemy combatant was irregular at best. Leah made the decision in seconds. She told the interpreter to arrange it. The blood arrived within 20 minutes. Leah administered the transfusion. Ross stabilized. He would survive, though he faced months of recovery. When Ross regained consciousness 2 days later, Leah told him what had happened. She told him that the blood that saved his life came from someone who had been fighting against British forces weeks earlier. Ross was quiet for a long time. Then he asked why the fighter had agreed to donate. Leah said she did not know. but she suspected it was because someone had treated him like a human being when they did not have to. The story spread through the unit. Soldiers who had been hostile toward Leah went quiet. Drake never apologized, but he stopped openly criticizing her decisions. Major Talbot called her in again, but this time he just asked if she was okay. She said she was. Ross recovered and eventually returned to duty. He stayed in touch with Leah after deployment. He told her once that the transfusion had changed how he thought about the war, about enemies, about what it meant to be human in a place that encouraged you to stop, seeing other people as human. Leah completed her deployment and returned to the UK. She continued, serving with the RAMC for another 5 years before transitioning to civilian medicine. She worked in emergency departments in Manchester, treating the same kinds of patients her mother had treated. Addicts, homeless people, criminals. People society often forgot. She never spoke publicly about Iraq or the decisions she made there. But years later, she received a letter forwarded through military channels. It was from an Iraqi man who wrote that he had been detained by British forces in 2008, that a British medic had saved his life when others wanted to let him die, and that he had never forgotten her kindness. He said that after his release he had stopped fighting. He had gone back to his family, finished his education, and now worked as a teacher. He said he thought about her sometimes, about the choice she made, and that it had shown him that hatred was not the only option. Leah kept the letter in a drawer. She never responded. She had no way to. But she read it occasionally when she needed to remember why she had chosen this work in the first place. Her mother, now retired, asked her once if she had any regrets about Iraq. Leah thought about it carefully. She said she regretted the soldiers who died, the ones she could not save. But she did not regret treating everyone with the same care, because the moment she stopped doing that, she would have lost the only thing that mattered. Not her career, not respect from her unit, her humanity, and no war was worth losing that